Welcome, 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 ladles and jelly spoons. How are we? This is the BeeRPad. I'm Marcus Beer.
And I'm Raymond.
Yes, he's Raymundo Padilla, and we have a show for you.
We do have a show, whether it's good or not. We'll find out.
Because we are the king of lists now. We are the kings of lists.
Yes.
Because apparently that's all we seem to do, which is, easy. Because
the last one was in a list. We did Gen V.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. By the way, Gen V finale. I mean, it was saved by the two cameos at the end.
I enjoyed it.
You know what's better than Gen V?
What's that?
Invincible season 2, baby. It's back and it's
so
good already.
Off to a great start.
So good. Yes. So we are doing a list. And that list is the top 10 games we would like remade. And that's we pick and the way we run our lists is we don't have discussions where we just vote on things and everything. He picks 5, I pick 5, and that's it. It's like my 5 and his 5, and that's our list. So we have a veritable smorgasbord of delight, games from the ages that show that we are old dudes. So I'm going to ask you first, Ray, because it's time for you to go first.
Yeah.
Because that's the way we roll. We take it in turns because we're nice, fun people. Yeah. All right. So with regards to your number 5 or number 10 on the overall list, game that needs to be remade. Hit me, big boy.
All right. I am going with Parasite Eve. This was originally on the PlayStation 1. It was a 1998 game based on
1990. Back when you could buy a PlayStation game for $1 and still have enough for a trolley ride home and a suit of armor.
Yeah. And this was a Square Enix, or no, it was still Square at the time. They did not get Enix. There was no Enixation.
Twinkle in anybody's eye.
That's right. And at the time, Square was still largely known as an RPG factory. Final Fantasy was very much their thing, by far their largest franchise. It still is, not to the extent it was.
And they were known as a good company back then.
Yes. And Parasite Eve was Square's first M-rated game, so a lot of people didn't know what to make of that. They're like, ooh, what are we doing here? And they tried to push it as an RPG, but it was more action adventure-y. It did use some things like the active time battle, which Square was known for from the Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger games. But you're playing one character, this lovely lady named Aya Brea.
Oh, look at the polygons on that.
And you're basically, instead of swords and sorcery, you're a detective with a gun, and somehow you have mystical powers, which you find out later has to do with a future evolution of man that has a highly evolved form of mitochondria that allows you to do magic, cool, amazing things. And you have Aya and you have Eve, who is the evil person with the special mitochondria. So what I liked about this is that I didn't really have much experience with M-rated games, maybe Doom or something, but this was the first M-rated game I played that was focused heavily on story and character. And it would be like that for me for years to come. So it stood out from other M-rated games. It was very different from what I loved about Square, who was my favorite publisher at that time and for a long time after that. And I liked that it was more kind of survival horror-ish, maybe survival horror adjacent, and that Square was trying out new and different things. Why I want to see it remade is not a lot of people talk about the franchise anymore. It did have a sequel. It could obviously use updated graphics. And as a small reason, I want the mitochondria thing to come back, kind of to erase my memory of midichlorians, which was introduced in 1999. I think that was the Phantom Menace here, if I'm not mistaken.
That was indeed 1999. Yes, and I watched the Phantom Menace here in the US, even though I was living in the UK. Austin, Texas, because I was working for Blue Byte, and we went from E3 to Austin for meetings. and we took a tour of the river going through Austin, where the bats fly out.
Yeah.
And we saw the Phantom Menace, and I walked out of it thinking, "Oh my god, that's shit."
Now, what is your midichlorian count? I'm at a
First of all,
-2.
I've never played Parasite Eve.
Okay.
It was definitely, and I think, again, it's out. I think it's really interesting. I look at your list and I look at my list, and we definitely have our areas of preference.
Oh yeah.
In a lot of things, really. I mean, I've got
Yeah.
great taste in games and football teams, and you support Manchester City, who actually hammered another team tonight.
Young Boys.
You beat up Manchester City, beat up the Young Boys. That's not acceptable.
We made Swiss cheese out of the Swiss.
Yes,
champion.
the Young Boys of Bern, which is just such an unfortunate. And do you know where they play?
No, but I know they use artificial turf, and it's shit.
If memory serves, they actually the name of their stadium is the Wanksdorf Stadium. So Young Boys and wanking.
I think I saw that. It sounds like something you'd see on an adult website. The Young Boys of Bern.
Really, please don't type in Young Boys and Wanksdorf. Anyway, all right. My game is it's a little bit newer than yours.
Yes,
it is circa 2005, and it was an Xbox 360 game. I think it was 360. Yeah, it might have been Xbox One, actually. No, it might have been Xbox One. It was an Xbox One game. Fuck. All right, and it was from Radical Entertainment.
Yes.
Who were a baller team. And it might be the first really, really good Marvel superhero game. Oh. And that is Hulk Ultimate Destruction. So this it's funny. This game, they had the license. Vivendi had the license, and they had Radical work on the game, and Radical were working on Prototype at the time. Another game that perhaps really was just on the cusp of my list of games to be remade, because Prototype was an excellent game. But they used a lot of the stuff in Prototype. They sort of like field tested it in Hulk Ultimate Destruction, and it is a game that does what it says on the box. You are the Hulk. You destroy shit. Yeah. Buildings, cars, tanks. You run up the side of buildings. You do thunderclaps. You destroy shit. It's like Rampage, but with the Hulk. Yeah. And it's just a really, really fun game. I mean, it wasn't overly well reviewed. I think it came in probably in the 7s and 8s, but it was quite a simplistic game in a lot of ways, but it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I think
fun doesn't have to be complex. You just want to do cool shit as the Hulk.
I think it was also a little bit of snootiness from the games media at the time with regards to the fact that it was old generation Xbox. Right. Because everything, it's got to be brand new, it's got to be sparkly, or otherwise the only thing we can cut slack for if it's not new is Nintendo, because that's the way the games media work. So yes, I would say Hulk Ultimate Destruction is, I mean, it's probably impossible to find. I'd love to know how much it costs to find one, even if you could get it, because obviously Vivendi doesn't exist anymore in the game space. Activision is now part of Microsoft, but it's a Marvel thing, and Marvel is part of Disney. I'm not even sure if this was a spin-off of one of the Hulk movies, because it was a Vivendi Universal Games, and Universal was, I think, distributing the Hulk movies back then. And God knows what happened to Radical, but yeah, it's I'd love to see that game. I thought it was so much fun to play, so much fun.
I will say this: as I was looking for screens for this episode, the Google bot may or may not have shown a bunch of listings for Hulk Ultimate Destruction ROMs. May or may not. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't buy that stuff. It sucks. I mean, and this is where, I mean, you give thanks for like Video Game Archives, who are actually trying to get as many, a copy of each game so that you can actually see all this stuff, because so many games have just been lost to the annals of time due to licensing issues, audio issues. I mean, another one that almost made my list was Simpsons Hit and Run.
Oh, yeah.
I actually have that on PC here, but it doesn't work with Windows, not with the newest versions of Windows. So, and I don't have a Windows, was it Windows 98 PC?
Right.
Which is ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, that's another one.
One thing I was surprised about is how many old games have ended up on Steam, either refurbished or remade.
Well, there's a big market for them.
Yeah.
And, for the PC is always the easiest way to do that.
Yeah.
But it just depends. I mean, obviously we were expecting, KOTOR 1 and 2 to be remastered. But they've been caught up in this Embracer issue where, Embracer went too big way too fast. I can understand why they were really keen to do what they did and respect that, but they just got too big too fast. And I think they've bitten off more than they can chew, which is why we've seen so many dev teams, including the ones who did Saints Row, Volition, gone. And it's sad. Yeah. It is sad. The industry is having a really bad consolidation issue right now. And it doesn't help when, Microsoft's buying a bunch of companies and streamlining and letting people go. But anyway, that was my number 5. Tell me about your number 4, Raymond.
My 4 is a music rhythm game from 2002 for
Star Wars Connect.
Nope. Also a PlayStation game. I think later it was released on PlayStation 2, and there was a Game Boy version that I also did play a lot. And it is Britney's Dance Beat.
That's Britney, bitch.
It is. I don't think she had that line yet in 2002.
Well, she does now.
She does now. So this game was developed by Metro, who made one of my favorite rhythm games called Bust a Groove. It plays the exact same way, uses the same engine, but obviously with Britney graphics and Britney songs. You play the part of an aspiring dancer trying to get into Britney's backup crew, and you can choose a male or female avatar, and you dance to her songs, and later you can have dance-offs with Britney herself. Now, at the time, there was a limited amount of audio because it was pretty early in her career, and we were still on CD-ROMs. So there was only 5 songs. It's Baby One More Time, Oops, I Did It Again, Stronger, Overprotected, and Slave for You, I think, was the most recent song. So only 5 songs, so there's not a whole lot you can do. It was great as a party game and great, for replaying, but now she has had so many more hits in the last 21 years. She's been around that long. That's nuts. And, her book just came out, so she's bigger than ever and, maybe a little cuckoo, but
well, given what's happened to her over the past 20 years, with her, especially, the bullshit that she's had to deal with from the media to the conservatorship with her, scumbag father.
Yeah.
And then, this Justin Timberlake shit where, he's a fetid little 4-foot midget and he cheated on her, and she's the one who got vilified because, in the 2000s and the early 2010s, it was okay to pick on young women.
Right.
Thankfully, it's not cool to do that anymore. But she's had a rough ride of it. I'm surprised she's not in a worse state than she is. And the fact that she has her life back is great, because at the end of the day, it's Britney, bitch.
And even before she became a star, just the way her parents raised her to basically make her a star was just cruel.
The parents are trailer trash.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah, that part
I mean, they are trailer trash. I mean, I've read excerpts from the autobiography, and the fact that both the mother and the sister have written tell-all exposés to cash in on her, and the father was paying himself something like $6 million a year,
right?
Fuck all, and she couldn't date. I mean, anyway, let's go back to the game. But you know what? I'm Team Britney. I am Team Britney. That young lady, and has had so much shit her entire life, and she just deserves a fucking break.
Yeah, I hope she finds her happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of things that are infamous, what is your next pick, Marcus?
Why, it's funny you should use that particular segue, because my next pick is Infamous 1 and Infamous 2 from the wonderful team at Sucker Punch and Sony. And Infamous. I don't I don't include Second Son in this because Second Son's a part of poo. I'm talking about OG Infamous, PlayStation 3 level in Infamous. Again, another superhero game, but one of the greatest superhero games of all time that doesn't involve a Marvel or DC superhero.
Right.
Set in post-apocalyptic New York-ish, and the second one is set in post-apocalyptic New Orleans-ish. An absolutely fantastic game. You have electrical powers. You can hover. You can upgrade them as you go along. You can shoot bolts. You can glide on electrical rails. You can levitate. It's just, the first one's the origin story with a little bit of time travel, and the second is an evolution of the character, and you're up against this big monster thing, this thing swath to all of America, and is working its way down towards New Orleans. But incredibly well written, incredibly fun to play, excellent control system, really imaginative use of powers, and then the good side, dark side aspect as well, because you could be a superhero or you could be a super arsehole. And there are some games where I would play it through and I played nice boy, and then I'd play it in the other way and it'd be naughty. But anyway, yes, fantastic. I would love if Sucker Punch could actually do Infamous 1 and 2 remaster as one big game, because I think it would be fantastic.
Oh, that's interesting.
It would,
just one game.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of content there.
Yeah,
and they wouldn't have to tweak with the controls or the actual gameplay or the story. They'd have to. They could take advantage of Rumble and Tilty and stuff like that, but yeah, it would just be a super fun game. And I actually played it on PS Now last year. So I was playing it on my desktop machine because I had PS Now on there. And it was just still so much fun. It works so well, so incredibly playable. And it's an excellent game that, especially Infamous 2, did not get the respect it deserved from Sony. Because Sony released Infamous 2 on the first day of E3. And I couldn't fucking believe that. I couldn't believe that. It's like, wow, way to have this game have the reviews totally hammered by putting it out day one of E3 when all the announcements are out there. I really hope that Sony's learned their lesson there, but I really would love to see Sucker Punch, who's obviously gone on to great heights with Ghosts, but I'd love to see that game come back, and I'd love to see it get the full Monty of upraising on the PS5 and the PC.
So, brief Sucker Punch tangent. Also, one of my favorite studios, and I always thought that Sony didn't treat them as well as they should have. So I agree with you there. And it's almost like if Sony was the parent and had three sons, like, this is our awesome son, Naughty Dog, and our other beautiful son, Insomniac, and our other guy, Sucker Punch there. So
yeah,
I always felt they kind of got. I don't know if that's true at all, but that was
no. I'm with you. Ghosts was such an excellent game, and I'm looking forward to seeing the movie when that comes out. And I'm sure we'll get a sequel soon. But with the misstep was Second Son, which was obviously pressured into being a launch title for the PS4.
Right.
And it was not a good use. They basically moved it to Seattle. They introduced a new character and give him a new origin. And I'm sorry, if you're playing as a superhero, smoke is not the sexiest fucking. Smoke is what you do when you've got shitty powers. You're like, oh, I don't have a cigarette. So yeah, I would like to have seen Cole back. I would like to have seen the evolution of his powers. And I still hold out hope that at some point we will get Infamous remastered.
That would be awesome.
What's next for you? What's your number 3 with a bullet?
This is the oldest game on my list, going all the way back to 1995. I think we were still using typewriters or stone tablets or something.
AOL.
AOL. You're getting internet from the CDs on a magazine. But it is Chrono Trigger, another Square game, and this was a massive RPG but not as massive as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, which were, still the big dogs, especially in Japan. But for RPG nerds, it's still revered. It's a fantastic story, but what really grabbed me was the characters. It had, and keep in mind, this is 1995, so deep games with great narratives and great characters were uncommon back then. So I was just taken aback by how well developed these characters were and how much you learned about them if you engaged in conversations with different ones. It just really, really blew me away in terms of what a video game could be in terms of storytelling and characterization. And I liked that it wasn't as complex as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest at the time. Games have only gotten more complex then, but it was more accessible, but the gameplay was still engaging. It was still a square active time battle game. Unlike most RPGs at the time, when you got into a random battle, it didn't pull you into a battle screen. You stayed on the map of where you were and you fought that way. So that was novel at the time as well. And they did a PlayStation sequel, Chrono Cross, but no, it wasn't good. There have been remasters, but I want a full remake, like from the ground up with modern graphics, but with the same great storytelling and characters. That is my dream for Chrono Trigger.
Again, it's a game I haven't played because again, it's just outside of my.
Yeah.
Funny, it's like me in the late 80s, early 90s, the sort of like Super NES period. Probably would have loved Chrono Trigger. But once I moved beyond the Super NES, I just lost my passion and my joy for these sort of like these Square Enix games. I mean, I used to play Final Fantasy on the Game Boy, the OG Game Boy in the late 80s. I loved it. I mean, I had to sit next to the power outlet where the thing charged it. The thing charging, because I would absolutely kill the battery. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, anything that Square Enix put out there. I mean, it's. Actually, a lot of those games, Secret of Mana, on the Super NES. I know not necessarily Square, but I mean, Shining Force on the Genesis. That was another fantastic game. But yeah, I lost my taste for them, and I've developed this serial aversion to things, especially turn-based combat. I mean, it basically put me off Baldur's Gate 3, because I'm one of these guys who, like, when combat's happening, nobody takes it in turns. Nobody say, after you, dear boy, you take a shot at my head, and then I'll return the compliment if I survive. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just this pet foible I have. But yeah.
Know how much more interesting gang fights would be if they were turn-based? Come on. You want to see that.
Look, if gang fights are going to be interesting, you have to watch West Side Story.
Yes.
Because they should, they should basically combine Chrono Trigger and the Britney Spears game. So you can have turn-based dance RPG battles.
BTS would kill everyone.
Probably.
Moving on to your next pick, Marcus.
My next one is now, this is a trilogy, but it also is the oldest. It's a game of a set of games on this list, because I have you beaten by about, I think, 2 years, 3 years even.
I think so.
Actually, maybe even more than that. I am talking about the Strike series from EA, which is Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, and Urban Strike. Desert was the first one, then came Jungle, then came Urban. Now, helicopter combat game. So like isometric top-down pseudo 3D view. Bunch of fun. You fly missions. You pick people up. You rescue them. You shoot shit. You shoot more shit. And they got. I mean, obviously they're looking. That's a Sega Genesis. By the way, it also came out on the Super NES, but the Super NES versions were shite. But at some there was a period where these sort of games worked so much better with the Genesis with the control pad, because the Super NES had the squishy one. And then when the 6-button joypad came in, that was just so good. joypad ever. But yeah, the Strike games are just so good. They're just so enjoyable. You can again make an argument for these three to be converted into one game because Desert Strike, and it was a little bit of controversy. Desert Strike came out during Desert Storm, the 1990s battle in Iraq, the Iraqi War, and then Jungle Strike happened, and it was like, here's all the fun that you get from Desert Strike, but this time it's green. And then Urban Strike, they obviously brought it into a more guerrilla warfare, war-torn city thing, and it's, like I said, just exceptionally enjoyable set of games. And this is back when EA were actually making more than the same 4 games over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another one on that could have hit this list, and that's the Road Rash trilogy.
Oh yeah,
Road Rash, motorcycles. You have chains. You try and knock people off. You could have thrown Skitchin in there, which is a skateboarding game where you sort of ride behind cars and do tricks and stuff. And this was all 16-bit games. There's such a great back catalog of games that EA has not expanded upon because all they're doing is fucking modern. Battlefield 1896 or 2010 or whatever the fuck it is, and the sports games. I mean, I would love to see somebody at EA go, we're going to do this, and not do it in a, we're going to do this and we're going to put it on an iPad and we're going to microtransaction the shit out of it. No, turn it into a $20 game for download, digital delivery. And there are so many other games that you can actually put in it. Hell, put some of the classic FIFA games out there or something. Perhaps you don't have the rights anymore because they didn't sign them up in perpetuity. But there were so many great EA games. And that's the one thing that I'm looking forward to at the Activision acquisition by Microsoft, is that Microsoft have said Activision have this great library trove of games.
Yes.
And they are going to explore them with regards to bringing some of them back. I think that is something that anytime somebody has an acquisition, they should be looking to say, what can we do? What can we bring back? And yeah, at the time, I think EA was just doing marvelous stuff on the Sega Genesis. NHL Hockey 94, one of the greatest hockey games of all time. The first FIFA, also another outstanding game. So yeah, I would love to see Desert, Jungle, Urban Strike. Just call it the Strike Trilogy. Bang it out. Don't have to faff with it too much. Uprise the graphics. Have a little fun with it.
Am I remembering Soviet Strike? Is that part of that as well? Or is it like a later generation? I remember playing the game.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I might have forgotten about Soviet Strike.
I don't remember any details. And really quickly, as for Activision, bring on Wakeboarding Unleash, Microsoft.
Right. Soviet Strike was a PS1 and a Sega Saturn game.
Aha.
So that's what happened with that one. So, yeah. I didn't play it. I really didn't play it. But, yeah, that's another one you could easily throw in. I was just focusing on the Sega Genesis, right. Sega Mega Drive.
All right.
One.
No, makes sense. Yeah. But I will go on to my next pick. And we're going back to Sucker Punch territory, but this is before Sucker Punch, and for that matter, Insomniac and Naughty Dog, before they got angry, and they were known for their wonderful cartoon platformers.
You missed one.
Did I?
Yeah. I think I might. Did I go back to back or something? Hang on. No, this is you, number 3. Your number 3, please.
I did Chrono Trigger.
Oh, you swapped one out. I'm going off an old list.
Yes.
So your number 3 was not the list
no.
you gave me, you sneaky dog. Look at you trying to confuse a senile old man. It's not difficult.
So I'm going with Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. And this game had beautiful graphics. It almost played like you were playing a living cartoon. And it was different from Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank, which were the other big Sony platformers at the time, in that a lot of it was, it was obviously a platform game, but stealth was a big element of it, as you see Sly himself slinking across this wall here, avoiding detection. So it was different than the beat 'em up, more actiony platformers of the time. And I loved how it looked. I loved how it played. The level design was super clever. And this was the game that really made me fall in love with Sucker Punch as a studio. I thought it was amazing what they did here. It was just so distinct. Like, and I just love that it was like a living cartoon. And I really wish we can see more of this. I know there's more money in the big action games that like Infamous and stuff like that, but maybe they can have a smaller team do an update of Sly Cooper in 3D. That would be really cool. But just to have that platform stealth combination, which is very unusual, I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, I mean, you just inadvertently, I think, hit the nail on the head with regards to what's wrong with the games industry. The games industry is very much like the movie industry right now, is that in that there's the big blockbusters. There's on one end, which is the the Starfields, the Cyberpunks, the Fortnite, Call of Duty, Halo, etc., etc., etc. These big action set piece oriented games that are very similar to the Marvel movies, DC movies, whatever else. And then on the other extreme, you've got the indie movement, the smaller, much smaller dev companies who are doing, a 1.8.5 as opposed to double A, and they're getting them out onto Steam or whatever.
Yeah,
but there's no middle ground.
Yeah,
There used to be so many games released, and I know the cost of living has gone up. It's more expensive to make games now, but there is no middle ground. Much like there is no middle level of movies.
I agree.
Everything has to be a blockbuster, or it's it's dead. That's why Barbenheimer was such a fun weekend,
Right.
to have those those two movies back to back, because they were not blockbusters in the sense we would come to expect. And I really do miss that. I do miss that there was a new game being released every week, sometimes two or three, and the advent of digital delivery should make it easier. But the consolidation in the industry is really harming it.
Right. I mean, because of that, I have played a lot of smaller indie games that are, $5-10 games. You're getting like 3 or 4 hours of gameplay, but they're really unique and original experiences. And I love that they're there. But I totally agree with you in that like middle ground where you have a little more budget, not like a super blockbuster budget, but you can make
it's the double A game. The double A game seems to have sort of like missed out. I mean, we know the triple A games are the £800 gorillas.
Yeah,
but it's those other games that have just vanished. They're just not getting clicks because again we've now moved to a gaming society where if it's everybody has to be online, everybody has to be sharing them playing the game, and it's like everything has to be multiplayer and this, that, and the other. And a game like Sly Cooper wouldn't get made nowadays. Infamous probably wouldn't get made nowadays, and it sucks because we had it better a decade ago. I mean, you think about 2012 in particular. What a baller year for games that was.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think it's because of the way that publishers run their businesses now? Like the business model of publishing has changed so much with microtransactions, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to, I mean, look, there are a lot of smaller dev studios are trying to do their own thing, but Microsoft acquisitions, Sony's acquisitions, Embracer Group and their acquisitions they unfortunately do have a negative effect in the industry, in that a lot of people are losing their jobs, and a lot of these development houses are going out the door because they are being led by people who don't seem to be qualified to make fucking decisions on what games should be made. And I'm not talking about Sony and Microsoft so much, but I am talking about some of the kooky decisions out of Embracer. I mean, if you look at Saints Row, Saints Row for one of my favorite games of all time. We could have made the remake list, but I was terrified they'd turn it into that last Saints Row game, which I had a gift card and I spent it on that game. And so I put in like 20 hours on that game. And it's not awful. It's buggy, but it's just bland and mediocre. It has no life to it. The others were not the greatest games. I mean, the first Saints Row game was a cheap little fucking knockoff of GTA, but 2 and 3 were like, oh, we're not going to rip off GTA anymore. We're just going to throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. And they went absolutely bananas. And it was brilliant. It was perfect. And we need more of that. We do need more of that. And Sony and Microsoft should be really pushing that. And they should be, doing stuff to encourage companies to make those games, stick them on, Xbox Live or PlayStation Plus. Nintendo are just going to be Nintendo. They'll keep on doing their exact same thing over and over and over. So yeah, I'm sorry I've got off on a little tangent, but it's been a long time since we ranted about the state of video games.
Yes,
but it's been a horrible year if you work in video games,
right?
Because again, this consolidation is killing the industry. It's killing creativity. Every game has to come out and do gangbusters, and then have people buying this microtransaction shit, or otherwise it's a disaster. And I'm sorry, it's just a sad state of affairs.
And just to clear things up, Nintendo actually does have a pretty good indie outreach program.
Good.
One of our friends works there.
I just look at their AAA output, and it's the same 6 titles over and over. And that gives me a negative, skewed view of Nintendo that I should probably readdress, but I just don't want to play the same shit over and over that I was playing 300 years ago when, the Super NES was out and we had F-Zero the first time, and we had Donkey Kong Country, and we had Pilot Wings, and,
right?
So on and so forth. But yeah, I probably do Nintendo a disservice, and it's good to hear that they're reaching out. But again, it's not indie. We need that middle layer. We need that mid-level publisher. I mean, we need the Blue Byte, the Nova Logic, the Microprose. We need those companies, Acclaim, that that are gone. There's nothing like them anymore.
Yeah,
and it sucks.
But know what you need? You need a good fight, Marcus, which I believe is your next pick.
Yes, my next pick, another Sega Genesis game, which again came out on the Super NES, but just was nowhere near as good. You had to have the 6 button on this one though, because the 6 button was the first one to have the really diagonal shooting, the diagonal options on the shooting. So yes, this is a clash of 2 amazing sci-fi franchises. Based on a comic book that was just amazing, and I actually do have the collected edition of the comic book, and it is RoboCop v Terminator. 2D scrolling, so semi-side scrolling platform shooter. You play RoboCop. You got to destroy the Terminators. That's the entire game. It's got the most banging 16-bit soundtrack I've ever heard in my life. The game is so enjoyable. The weapons that you get to pick up, the audio is great in that they have, they do have, from the movie RoboCop from the movie, Peter Weller. Saying some things. Now I know RoboCop Rogue City actually came out, but that's not in the same zip code of this game. This game is just balls to the wall, shooting, explosions. You're blowing up Terminators, all the different versions of Terminators. You've got Ed 209. You've got little drones. You get to destroy OCP over and over again, and various parts of old Detroit, and you end up moving into a more post-apocalyptic world to take out Skynet. And the weapons are amazing, and the game's got the most perfect difficulty difficulty settings, where it starts off and it will give you all these extra lives, and you get these weapons and boom, 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 and you go into the sort of like the final 4 or 5 levels. You're like, yes, I've got 15 lives, and I've got the right weapons, because you can only scroll. I think you're going to go through 2. And then you die, and you'd lose one of your weapons, and then the fucking doubt sets in, and then you die again, and you lose your other awesome weapon, and you're back to Robo's base gun, and you're looking for the jars of baby food to heal you. And it's just it's a gloriously fantastic gory shoot 'em up. It was released by Virgin back in the day. There's another games company that went bye-bye, which sucked, because I mean, in the 90s in particular, Virgin were eponymous. They had a great bunch of stuff. They did stuff with Westwood. We had Command and Conquer. We had Blade Runner.
Did they do Earthworm Jim? Was that
Earthworm Jim? Yeah, they did Cool Spot.
Oh, that's right.
As well.
7-Up.
Yeah. Cool Spot was basically the 7-Up. Yeah, the dot from the 7-Up. And it was great. Earthworm Jim was a great, fun game.
Yeah.
They had the Disney license, and they did The Lion King and Aladdin, which were two very, very good Disney games. I mean, they were carbon copies of the movies, but they worked so well, Aladdin in particular. And again, this was another one where the Genesis was so much better than Super NES for this stuff. Super NES had the best fighting games. They had the best JRPGs. And I know I can't say JRPGs, but RPGs from Japan. But the more Western games just thrived on the Genesis. They really did. All right, so we are down to numero uno.
Yes.
Your numero uno, then my numero uno. Tell me, big boy.
My top pick is Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. This is an action RPG game, not the proper Baldur's Gate game, which is a straight RPG. And this was released in 2001 for PlayStation 2. And it was published by Interplay, which I totally forgot that. Yeah, I totally forgot about that studio and how much I loved their games. And
Descent?
Yeah.
Free Space?
They did Icewind Dale. Yeah.
Icewind Dale? Yeah. I mean, I mean, that's the thing. If you're, if the only games you play are now Fortnite and Call of Duty and FIFA and Madden and all that sort of stuff, you've missed out on so many great games. Yeah. And I know people will go, "Oh, you're just old, and this looks like shit." Yes, they do look like shit compared to what we're what we're seeing nowadays. But all the stuff that you see up on screen there back in the now is what's taking up 90% of the bloody budget for these games, and it's leaving gameplay behind. Please carry on, my friend. I'm sorry I tangented you.
No worries. So, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance is a hack and slack action RPG. You spend a lot of your times exploring dungeons, beating up monsters, finding treasure like you do. You destroy a lot of barrels because apparently adventurers hate barrels and there's always cool stuff in them. But as you can probably infer from the title, this had a Wizards of the Coast license. So there were a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and Forgotten Realms elements to the game. And you see that with the weapons and the armor. And even though the gameplay is mostly action, there's a lot of stuff you do when you level up where you have skill trees and different powers and abilities that are very much straight RPG. Now, as a bonus, if you beat the game in extreme mode, you get Dritz Duerden as a playable character. I'm a big fan of the R.A. Salvatore novels. So this was a huge thing for me back in 2001. And in Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, you can unlock Dritz and Artemis Entreri as playable characters. And I loved every second of it. So what I envision in this remake is the same type of style of game where it's an action adventure, hack and slash dungeon crawler. But you don't have the generic characters I think you have like a generic fighter, archer, and sorceress in the first one. Just forget about all those. You play as Dritz or you play as the other companions of the hall to experience the game on different ways. You could even play as the bad guys like Artemis Entreri. Jarlaxle, I think, would be fantastic to play as. So, yeah, along with the expected updated graphics and sound and modern gameplay, I want this game with Forgotten Realms characters that we actually know instead of these random generic heroes and heroines. So that is number one on the list of the game I want remade the most. Now let us go to your topic, sir.
Yes, my number one. My number one. Now, this was a game that came out in, let me see. Ooh, when the
97, I want to say.
26th of June, 1997.
Ah,
It was a very, very good time to be in games. And it was by Bullfrog Studios, British studio that kind of evolved into Lionhead, Peter Molyneux. And this is a studio that did like Theme Hospital and a bunch of really crazy ass games, and then they got acquired by EA. And the game series is Dungeon Keeper, and there's 3 titles. There's Dungeon Keeper, The Deeper Dungeons, and Dungeon Keeper 2. Now you can pick these up on Good Old Games, GOG.com,
right.
like $2. No DRM, fantastic. Unfortunately, the first one is because of the graphical issues, where it was like, I mean, I don't think it was even 720 back in the day. You put it on a big screen now, and it's unplayable because it's so pixely. But the whole thing is, you are the dungeon master, but you're the evil dungeon master, and you are out there to train up your minions and take out the good and nice people of this fictional country. And it's like the Prince Charming and this, that, and the other, and it's a total spin on the fairy tales, and it's such a British game because we've always had this. We have this inner darkness. I think it's just us. We love being the bad guy. We do it so fucking well. But yeah, you get to build training rooms, gold, to pay your minions, gold to, you have to feed them, and to feed them, you build hatcheries, and the chickens hatch out, and you pick the chickens up, and you can drop them in front of your minions, and they will eat them, and and you have ogres and trolls and skeletons and vampires that you can, if you got a graveyard. I mean, it's basically everything's progression based. You start off with a hatchery and a gold room, and you have to protect the heart of your dungeon, which is this giant egg crystal thing, and you unlock these new rooms to keep your people happy. I mean, it's a sim game, but it's an action sim game.
Right.
The mistress is really funny. I mean, she's basically some S&M character who likes being whipped and slapped, because you do slap your characters to get them working. And that's all the characters, not just the mistress. Your imps who are building stuff. And it is just an absolute pinnacle of gaming achievement. Because PC games back then, the PCs, I've got a new 486, a Pentium, I've got a Pentium 486. What? And people, the iPad has more power than these things.
Yeah.
Things back in the day. But the games were so good, and because the limitations were there with regards to the hardware, people had to get creative, and there was more focus on gameplay than graphics, because there was only so much you could do graphically. And this is where we've had this 180 spin. But Dungeon Keeper is just, I mean, it is quintessentially English or British, just like another game that I want to see remade, trilogy I want to see remade, and that's Fable, the Fable series, because the new Fable game, it needs Zoe Wanamaker, it needs Stephen Fry, it needs to be quintessentially British. But yeah, Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2. The Deeper Dungeons was an expansion pack, came with a level designer. And it is just the most fun. It is literally so good to be bad.
Yeah.
This game.
Yeah.
You play it?
Yeah, I did. I just love the concept. Because when at the time, when I think of games like this, I think of Civilization or SimCity. And this, I love that you're the dungeon master and you have to fuck up the heroes, and just conceptually it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, EA released an absolutely horrible mobile game about 6-7 years ago. Fucking repugnant. The spiritual successor is Evil Genius 1 and 2,
right,
which takes the same sort of premise and puts it in more of a 1960s James Bond bad guy kind of thing, maybe even Despicable Me kind of aspect to it. But as much as I like Evil Genius 1 and 2, it doesn't have the ease of which Dungeon Keeper sucks one in. And it just sucks you in, and it's so easy to control, and everything's so intuitive. And you're playing with a mouse and keyboard, and you just click. Oh, there you go. I need hotkey to my hatchery because there's not enough food. I need to expand it. Oh, my gold's run out. Oh, I found some gems, and I'm just gonna have them hack at the gems. Oh, there's lava. Oh, here come the bad guys. Have I made sure that my prison's big enough? Because then I put them in my prison and lock the door, and I starve them, and they raise the skeletons.
Another thing I liked was that you were controlling a giant hand, even that you're controlling with the mouse and keyboard, but you had the hand to place objects, and like you said, to slap things to wake them up. And it just made you more connected to the game. Like you see yourself like, oh, I'm going to put this thing there, and it's going to drop on this guy. And I thought it was so clever.
It's really clever, and just such a great spin on, as you said, Populous, Civ, Sim City, all these games where it's like, oh, we're going to do this, and we're going to be so nice. And
right.
I know. And it's just had this, and it summed up an era with British gaming, because back in the 90s, the 80s and the 90s in particular, was one of the best times for the British games industry. Obviously, there were American games companies opening up offices and stuff, but because so many people had trained, taught themselves how to code on Sinclair Spectrums and Commodore 64s back in the 80s, they now moved on, and they were used to getting things out of, getting a lot out of limited hardware. And one of the most shining periods of my life was that decade of the 90s in particular, because I worked in the games industry my entire, all through the 90s. Retail, as a buyer for a retail chain, as a games journalist, as a TV journalist, and then as a PR person. And it was just such a great community, and everybody was much more tight-knit because everybody was based Bath for all the magazines, really, with the exception of Macclesfield and IDG. You'd have all the games companies in and around London. And everybody used to meet up, go out for drinks after work. Everybody knew each other. We'd invite each other to each other's parties. Doesn't matter if you work for somebody else, you were coming to our party. Because that's what you did. And that's the one thing when I moved to the US, because it's so fractured over here, I did miss out on that. Even when I was living in San Francisco, it was just not as good camaraderie wise. But yeah, that period of the 90s was so good for creativity and generally amazing. It was just an amazing time. And this was the game that, I would go home and I'd boot up my machine and I would drop the CD-ROM in and I would play this till about 3 o'clock in the morning and then go to work the next day. Unless I was out drinking.
Right.
But Dungeon Keeper, Peter Molyneux. I mean, I think unfortunately his legend has been tarnished somewhat with his later games.
Yeah.
But Bullfrog, Lionhead, Peter Molyneux, some of the greatest games of all time from this very, very biased Brit. But that is my number one all time. Would love to see come back. I don't think it will, and that's why I'm so glad every time I buy a new PC, I go straight to Good Old Games and I download another copy of Dungeon Keeper and I just keep it running.
Excellent. Now I hope some of you guys get to play them. And if you're watching this live, please share some of the games you want remade, or if you're watching the replay, please leave them in the comments section or send us a tweet. All our socials are up there. Your likes and subscribes are really appreciated. And Marcus, we have some pretty excellent comments that
we do indeed. I mean, David, I think he was talking about your first choice.
Yeah, he's talking about Parasite Eve. He would love to see a good remake of the game, but he would be scared.
He's right. Yeah. I mean, and it also goes to show that, I mean, in the 90s, like I said, I was in the UK, but I mean, in the 2000s, Capcom, Square, and the Pro Evo company did Pro Evo football.
Oh, right. Konami.
Konami, sorry, I just had old man brain fog. Konami, I mean, they dominated.
Yeah.
Their press conferences were must attend at E3. Yeah. They had all this stuff, and now look at them.
Yeah.
I mean, Square is obviously still going, but
it's not the same. Square,
it's not
Western now.
Yeah. It's not the same.
Mark has a copy of the Hulk software. Ooh.
That's
and
amazing.
he loves their shout of hit and run.
Yeah. It's a classic. Radical entertainment.
And on Infamous, he disagrees with you. He likes Second Son.
Look, I got no problem with anybody disagreeing with me on this sort of stuff. It's all subjective. And at the end of the day, Infamous 1 and 2 had a much stronger lead character than Second Son. The Second Son character was just a fucking tool. And his powers were nowhere near as enjoyable.
Right.
So, yeah, it was...
And Carlos agrees with you. He is also a big fan of Infamous, or as I always used to call it in the office, Infamous. That's a Three Amigos reference, and you should watch that movie and that scene. Mark asks, would I want a Final Fantasy VII remake style or an HD 2D for Chrono Trigger? I want the former, because I really like that not only did Final Fantasy VII Remake update the graphics and sound, they changed elements of the story and are branching out, kind of like in how Star Trek branched in a different direction with J.J. Abrams. It's still the same characters you know and love, but there are differences because of the timeline split. So I would want an FF7 style remake. Mark still has his copy of Desert Strike on Mega Drive. Wow.
I have Desert Strike and Jungle Strike.
And he thinks he has RoboCop versus Terminator as well.
I also have the Genesis version here as well, and
And question for you from Carlos: would Marcus keep RoboCop versus Terminator as a side scroller, or would it be a first person shooter like the newer
side scroller?
Okay.
You move it to first person, you lose so much. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with this sort of side scroller. I mean, you look at Castlevania, you look at Metroid.
Yeah.
I mean, these are games that have been side scrollers almost their entire. I mean, yeah, you may be moving back and forth, but I mean, you've got to go. You got to go with the side scroller. Don't fuck with it. And
when Castlevania did try 3D, didn't turn out so great. So I wanted 2D for that. Carlos wants a Mega Man remake with a harder. Mega Man can get pretty difficult already, but I want it even harder. Wow.
Yeah, my problem with Mega Man from the beginning was no diagonal shooting. It was just felt really difficult with it, and I just never got into it.
Mark has some picks here. Time Splitters 1. Ooh, great series there. Persona 2, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Trails in the Sky Trilogy, Final Fantasy 6, Octopath Traveler style. Yeah, 6 would be great. I think that gets overlooked as a great entry in that series. I mean, 7 is so big because it was the first one on modern consoles, and for many people, the first Final Fantasy they played, but I love me some 5 and 6 any day. Dino Crisis. Haha.
You and Mark have I think Mark is the British version of you. You have such a lot in common. It's really quite sweet.
Am I evil Mark, or is Mark evil me?
Do you have to be evil? I'm evil enough for both of us.
That's true.
All three of us. But I mean, there's so many great titles in there. I mean, we also talked, like I said, about Hit and Run.
Right.
You could go through every era of Super NES and the Genesis, the Sega Saturn. I mean, the Ready to Rumble boxing on the Saturn. That was such a great game.
Was that Dream? I thought it was Dreamcast.
Sorry, Dreamcast. Yes, I apologize. It was the Dreamcast. Saturn had Virtua Fighter.
That's right.
When that came out, we were like, ooh. yeah, I mean, we could actually probably go through every single generation of games,
Yeah.
and just come up with a top 10 of each with PlayStation 1 through 4, and ditto with Xbox. And
More listicles, and you will
yeah, more
enjoy our
listicles.
listicles.
Yeah,
Just a
there
fun
are
word to
so,
say.
and look at that, Mark's new latest comment.
Ah.
I mean, that's just coming from two very bitter Liverpool players.
Oh, Caleb is arrived. I honestly can't think of a game I want remade because you're a millennial and you just started playing games like 2 weeks ago. But I do appreciate the Switch having older titles available through their online service. That is true. Now, Marcus, I wanted to ask you a question. Kind of, a lot of our picks pretty much come from a certain period of time in gaming or in our lives, really. How much of it is because we really love them, or how much of that is nostalgia and, just like wishing for simpler times?
I think it's a combination of three things. First of all, it's, yes, the nostalgia is obviously there. Two, we really love these games because I know that, and for Infamous, it's a reinforcement of how much I love that game. That when I played it on PS Now, I was just back in the zone and everything was great and it was just
Awesome.
wonderful. I think the other thing is that it also taps into times in our lives,
Yeah.
where we had time we work all day. We would play games, whether it be on the weekends or a couple of weeknights, and then we'd go out, we'd hang out with each other, and it was more sociable. And we didn't have, we may have relationships, but people don't have kids, don't have a mortgage, blah blah blah. And it was, a very fun time. I mean, the 90s was a fun time for me. The 2000s were a fun time. I mean, I just did one in the UK and then the next decade in the US, and met amazing people and got to hang out and worked with fantastic people. I mean, I worked at Novalogic and met some lifelong friends. And then Vivendi, and I had two of the best years of my life work-wise at Vivendi, and I just loved being there. And so I think that also that really factors in on it with how much gaming we could do. I mean, it's funny now that I'm not working regularly, unfortunately, but I am playing a lot more games. I just downloaded Football Manager 2024. But I actually started playing Phantom Liberty, which is the Cyberpunk expansion pack, the DLC. I missed the word expansion pack. Do you remember those things? And obviously on Steam, it tells you how long you've been playing the game. And I've put in 500 hours on Cyberpunk.
Damn.
500 fucking hours. And I'm probably going to put in another 100 and odd because of this expansion has just reworked everything because I'm restarting the game again. And there's so much new stuff I'm finding. And I think that's why I love the Cyberpunk game in particular, because it feels really old school in a lot of ways. It's not got any pretensions about it. Now that it's working and it's not buggy, it looks gorgeous. It's got great audio and everything, but it's a timeless game that could have worked 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right. I do want to address this comment from Caleb. For me, so many of the games I have fond memories of on NES, SNES, N64, GameCube, PS2 that could be ripe for a remake, I'm nostalgic for based on time, place, and people. That part is hard to create. I agree. And the more that I'm thinking about this, it reminds me of how when you hear a certain song, it kind of transports you to that time of your life when that song was popular or you're listening to that song a lot. And he adds here, I do miss playing Uno on Xbox Live with group chat. And that totally reminds me, the first time I spoke to Caleb in real life was on Xbox Live playing Uno. That was in the G4 days, I believe. So yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of how certain games could bring us to a certain point of our life. And I love that. That's the power of music, power of games, power of art.
Yeah, I mean, the music thing in particular is so powerful. A new movie dropped on Apple last week called Fingertips, and it's a a romantic drama-ish thing about people having tests, genetic tests to prove who their true love is, and it's just got. I mean, the movie itself is fucking awful. The protagonist is just this insufferable character, but the saving grace is that it's got such a baller soundtrack, which is basically Alison Moyet from the 80s. Alpha, she was called for the longest time when she was with she was in Yazoo, or I think Yaz as it was called over here. But I mean, just hearing that stuff, I mean, that's why Stranger Things resonates with us,
right?
With our generation, because of the movies, and again, the games, the pop culture, the comic books. That was our 80s experience. Huey Lewis, unfortunately, I mean, Huey Lewis, I mean, The Power of Love from Back to the Future is just one of the greatest banger tunes of all time.
Absolutely.
But Huey Lewis is now deaf and can't record anymore, which sucks because we're all getting old. But yeah, the music aspect is much like a movie or a TV show or whatever. I mean, I was watching a series called The Fast Show that came out in the 90s in the UK. And some of it's dated horribly, some of it's dated very well. And it's basically, it was aired on BBC America here as Brilliant, which is a stupid name. But it's basically 90-second to 2-minute skits. Recurring characters, week in, week out, 3 seasons. But it was fast, skit. And you've seen it a lot since with a lot of stuff on Comedy Central, Black Lady Sketch Show. I mean, boom, 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 quick. But yeah, I was just watching that and I was transported back to where I could tell you when that first season launched, I was working retail. Because we talk about it in the store the next day as we were polishing the TVs, dusting everything, and getting games into the systems ready to play and figure out what we're going to do. And yeah, oh god, my greatest films. I mean, that to me is. I don't know. I'd much rather honestly do a just break down decade by decade. Maybe we should do the 80s, the 90s, 2K of music, movies, and I mean that's all we're going to do. The BeeRPad is just going to be a bunch of old men reminiscing.
I almost want to do like break it down by song and do like the 5 best movie soundtrack songs, and probably half of them are by Phil Collins and Kenny Loggins. So.
Well, look, you can't go wrong with the Logmeister. Phil Collins, not so much.
Oh, Against All Odds is a fantastic song. I love that song.
As long as we don't invoke Bryan Adams and Everything I Do It For You.
I hate that
song. His fellow Canadian crooner, Ms. Dion, and My Song Will Go On, My Song Will Go On and on from Titanic. That fucking song.
What was that song Bryan Adams did with I think it was Sting and Rod Stewart?
We Are Old. Our balls are hitting our knees.
But was it for Three Musketeers or something? But there's a reason why it was 3 of them, and the song was garbage.
The 3 Rusty Steers.
But yeah, let us take us out of here on Carlos's comment, who mentioned Louis Lewis. I actually was 2 seconds away from saying The Power of Love when I was talking about The Power of Love. It's
an absolute, but I mean, it wasn't written for Back to the Future.
Yeah.
You read the behind the scenes oral histories, and that's something I'm huge on, is oral histories of movies.
Oral histories and listicles.
Yeah, it wasn't written for it. It was just one that was kind of siphoned in, but it just works. It really does.
And Huey Lewis was actually the first artist I ever saw at a press junket. I was working for Ziff Davis at the time, and he played at the Computer Shopper party at Comdex when that was the biggest trade show in the world. Doesn't even exist anymore. But it would crack me up when in between songs he'd be like, "Are you ready to party, shopper?" So I thought that was hilarious. And with that little story, we will bid you good night and farewell.
What are we doing? What are we talking about next week, Ray?
Well, I had emailed you 2 topics for next episode.
That's fine. I didn't say no to either topic. So
are we down? Okay, so next week we're gonna do a Movember episode where Marcus is going to talk and answer questions you have about his experience with cancer. I'm going to talk a bit about men's mental health issues, and hopefully we'll have a useful discussion, and hopefully we can all get something out of it.
It's going to be a very special episode of the BeeRPad.
Oh, I thought we were doing Blossom. Damn it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.